I want to begin by welcoming everybody. It's great to see this turnout here. We're really pleased with that. This is part of not only the teach-in, which we're excited to be part of, but also a weekly series that we do through the Disability Resource Center called Disability-tapas, and or tapas, that we do. And we record all of these through Zoom. So the screen, and then there's a little video showing me. So anybody that logs in remotely that can't attend in person can actually see this. And then we'll record it, and then people that aren't able to see it live, like you guys, can check it out for later. So we do this every week on different disability-related topics. So if you guys want to check out some more, you're more than welcome to every Thursday in this room, and we'll be doing it every quarter. So that said, this week's is called Accessible Learning Spaces, Addressing Mobility and Visual Access Needs. And my name is John Lee. I'm an Assistive Technology Specialist at the DRC. And
I'm Logan Duarte. I'm an Access Specialist at the DRC.
And how many of you guys, let's get a sense of who we've got here in the audience. How many of you are students? Raise your hand. All right. How about any faculty? Hey, I recognize you. Any staff? All right, great. Well, it's like I said, it's great to have you guys here. And we're going to try to get through this and leave some time at the end for Q&A. And if you do have any questions, something's not clear as we're going along, feel free to ask. And also, we kind of want to make this an inclusive space. So if you need to stand up, leave, move around or whatever, feel free. You're welcome to do that. And if you can't hear anything, let me know. And as we go, we'll try to describe what's going on the screen as well. So that said, we're going to start with kind of what we call the goals of accessible learning spaces. And we're looking at classroom, but we're also looking at kind of out in the field, wherever the learning's taking place. But a lot of what we'll refer to will be in spaces like we're in right now. So first and foremost, welcoming. We want people to feel like, hey, this is a space where I feel like I'm going to be able to learn with my peers and feel like whatever my diversity is going to be acknowledged and included in that. So a lot of ways we can communicate that that are very obvious and sometimes not so obvious, but we want to make that important. Easy as possible to get to and maneuver within. And again, we're going to be speaking at this from both a mobility and a visual perspective. Everyone can fully benefit from the course and related resources, and that's courses, the physical part actually in the classroom, as well as anything that might be online, if there's an online component, like through PolyLearn. And then usable equipment and software. And being a STEM school like we are here at Cal Poly, looking at our labs and other things that we might be using in the classroom, and making sure, again, everybody can use that regardless of their ability level. And this is, I do want to reference the source, and you guys can check this out online. It's the University of Washington Do It. Great resource for all things related to accessibility and disability. And they particularly look at the college experience with that. So if you want to learn more about this and how you can incorporate that as a student, faculty, and staff, great resource. So we talk about our optimal approach. So when you hear accessibility, you guys probably have heard of the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act. California's got its own accessibility guidelines. But just keep in mind, those are minimum requirements. What we want to strive for is what we call universal design or inclusive design. That's more the optimal way of setting things up. So if you think of ADA as like civil rights, universal design is human rights. And it kind of expands things even more and includes more than disability. So we like the term inclusive design, because I think that resonates a little bit more with our diversity and inclusivity initiatives on campus. But inclusive design is designed for a broad, not average, range of abilities, ages, sizes, cultures, languages, learning styles, and other characteristics. Doing so minimizes the need for special accommodations or adaptations. So how many of you have heard of universal design, that term before? Familiar with that? Okay. So does that definition kind of resonate with you guys that you've heard before? So it's not, as you notice, it's not just about disability. But as you can see with the example here, it could be even temporary disabilities or injuries. You break a leg, break a wrist. Persons who are just shorter stature, not due to a disability. It could be hobbits, if they actually existed, which I do believe they do. Very tall individuals, the 7-foot basketball player, Zion Williamson. If you watched the Duke-Carolina game last night, I'm a Carolina fan, so Duke fans, I'm sorry, you guys. Left-handed individuals, English language learners. So as you're going to see some examples of that, how that applies. But a lot of times when we talk about mobility and vision, when we design things for individuals with those disabilities, everybody tends to benefit. And you'll see examples of that. And that's inclusive design. You think about going into like the supermarket or any of the places on campus where you see those automatic doors, curb cuts, right? That's one of the more common ones. Those were usually designed for wheelchair users. But how many of you guys use curb cuts when you see them on sidewalks? For anything? Skateboarders, anyone here? Bicyclists, parents, baby strollers, pushing luggage. Perfect example, inclusive design. And here's just a pictorial of that. You see there's these are all silhouettes, a person with a broken leg, using a cane. There's the baby stroller, the wheelchair, pregnant mother, person using a walker, white cane user. Again, you see some cultural things. So kind of represents who really benefits. Going to go through really quickly the principles of universal design, and then really show you an example that was designed by Cal Poly students here that embodies that. So equitable use, flexibility in use, simple and intuitive, perceptible information, tolerance for error, low physical effort, and then the last one, size and space for approach and use. So a lot of these apply, you can think of them specifically with mobility and vision, especially perceptible information. Is what you're trying to convey, can it be perceived if you can't see it visually? Is there another way to get that information across? Can you get it auditorily, tactily? Low physical effort, opening doors, right? Moving up hills or getting into a building if there's a ramp. Size and space for approach and use, getting through a classroom, those kinds of things. So, and equitable use, a perfect example of that is those automatic doors. Everybody benefits. And when you're going to a grocery store, you got tons of groceries, you don't want to have to be pushing a door open, right? So that's a great example of equitable use. Right here at Cal Poly, we had some mechanical engineering students design an inclusive lectern. And this is a height adjustable lectern that was designed so a person in a wheelchair like myself could present either as a teacher or at a, like, for example, at the PAC or Chumash. Because how often you guys see a podium or lectern and it's a fixed height, right? You think about, well, what if somebody's not tall enough to get up over that podium or a wheelchair user? So these students designed it, and the idea was to have it, that equitable use, also have it a broad appeal. So designing it to look appealing and not look like something that's stigmatizing. Like this is, you know, you've seen those old wheelchairs that look like they're meant to be in a hospital. You know, this is something that looks more like it fits. It has that air of grandeur, I guess. But it embodies all the principles. It's height adjustable, flexibility in use. Its size and approach for use, it's wide enough for a wheelchair, about 30 inches wide. You can see the height adjustability all the way down, seated all the way up to somebody standing. Perceptible information, it's got a, when you power it on, it's got a light, and it also makes a sound, of course, when it goes up and down. So there's a lot of low physical effort. You raise and lower it by a motorized mechanism. So again, inclusive lectern because it really embodies those principles we're talking about. So key considerations for accessible learning spaces, mobility and vision. We kind of picked out some key things to keep in mind, especially for classroom and field trip type situations. Desk access, and that's not only just the actual desk itself, but getting to and around the desk. The aisle space between desks and around the classroom. Clutter-free is really important for individuals with mobility and vision. Whiteboard and chalkboard access for writing and for viewing and reading. And then slide presentation access for viewing and reading. So a lot of those, when we talk about whiteboard and chalkboard access, if I'm the professor, is there a way that I'm going to be able to write on the chalkboard and communicate information? You know, maybe a height adjustable chalkboard or whiteboard that would allow it to come down to a level I could write and then raise it back up for someone to read it in the back of the class. So here's when we're talking about some of the other areas, the lectern and podium access that we just went over, computer lab stations. We'll talk a little bit about that. Work height in labs and access to lab equipment. Again, really important. And field trips on and off campus and the parking and path of travel are particularly important. And you can see in this picture here, there's some examples of sit-to-stand workstations that can be adjusted to various heights. Those are a great solution overall in classrooms and in computer labs. So some key questions to think about when we talk about entrances and paths of travel. And these are just things to kind of keep in the back of your mind. Look at where you're working or where you're, as a student, where you're going to be going. Are there convenient wheelchair accessible parking spaces and routes of travel to classroom, building, or field site, and within the classroom or field site? So the path of travel is a critical one, especially on a campus like ours, because of what? The inclines, the hills, and so forth. So path of travel is that gradient as well as the actual clearance of the width and the type of surface. Are there automatic doors or electric door openers to the building? And if not, do the doors open and require minimal effort to open? Can you guys think of any doors on campus where it's extremely difficult to open? Yeah. So those might be ones where facilities can look at how can we, minimize the effort that it takes to do that. Because if you've ever been on crutches, you can probably appreciate how that's difficult to get in and out of doors. And those are often our folks that tend to really appreciate the importance of having easy doors to open. Our lever handles, rather than knobs used for classroom doors. You'll notice on some of the older classrooms, got a lot of the knobs, and those are really difficult. If you go to open something, try to do it with a closed fist. If you can't open it with a closed fist, then that's going to be something for somebody with mobility difficulty that could be hard to open. So that's kind of a good thing you guys can do. Can I operate this with a closed fist? Lever handles, you can. Can I use my elbow to open it and so forth? So that's why those are a best practice for design for doors. Gently sloping walks integrate into the design rather than steps and ramps that segregate. This is a great picture that Logan found of a ramp. You see how it's kind of embedded in the stairs. So it seems like it's all part of one thing. That's really important because from a social justice standpoint, that communicates we're all using the same entrance. It's not having something off to the side, which is traditionally what you might have. Because a lot of different groups for different reasons have experienced that segregated entrance to buildings. And the more we can make it the same entrance for everybody, the better. So even if it's a ramp off to the side, as long as we're going to the same door and not going to a back door, very important. Are there elevators to allow access to all classrooms in the building? Again, this is a challenge with older classrooms, but it's something to kind of keep in mind. If you're choosing a classroom, where's the elevator? Is it well marked? Is it operational? Those kinds of things. Are there ample high contrast large print? An 18-point font is large print. Directional signs, including Braille, when appropriate to and throughout the physical space of the classroom building. That's a standard that should be in place for signage. Is adequate lighting available in the classroom or at the field site? Particularly important for vision needs. Is there adequate room between desks for a person in a wheelchair to move? And we talk about the minimum for path of travel is 36 inches, so roughly about 3 feet. So, and that's including anything that might be in that aisle, like backpacks and so forth. It's a little different where there's turns involved, like sometimes 42 inches, like in hallways, if there's going to be a turn, and that type of thing. And then how is the terrain at the outdoor field site? Could a wheelchair traverse it? Or would other arrangements need to be made to facilitate equal access? And here in this picture, you can see, and this is actually at Avila Beach. If you guys have been there, you've probably seen there's some ramps out onto the beach, which are great if you have a chair that can go out on the sand. Not so great if you don't, you just kind of just stop. Like if I went there, I'd be like, I'm at the beach. There, just sink right in the sand. Great to be here. So far, I can almost reach the ocean. But we do have motorized beach wheelchairs that can be used at our beaches. And actually, we're one of the only public beaches in the state that has those. You've seen those big balloon tires with a joystick control for getting out on the beach. Again, that's kind of a combination of providing the assistive technology out there, but really, first and foremost, providing the access out there. So these are ADA compliant. And by the way, if you're not familiar with how a ramp should be, The guidelines are a ramp slope should rise 1 inch for every 12 inches of run. You guys heard of that? So that's the slope. So anything steeper than that, it's not really ADA compliant, and it starts to get a little bit steeper. And I can tell you there's places around campus that are not, they're a little too steep to get around, but some of that's the terrain. So then you look for what's another way to get to where we need to go. In classrooms, of furniture and fixtures, adjustable in height. We kind of look at that 28 to 34 inch range, if you can do it. Minimum 27 inch clearance for the knees for any kind of desk, but ideally something that can be adjusted that range, and allow for flexible arrangements of different learning activities and student groupings. So chairs that can move is great if you can rearrange things to make room for wheelchair. On appliances and other equipment are front-mounted, easy-to-operate controls with labels and large high-contrast print used. This is an important one from both a reach standpoint and a reading standpoint. Anything front-mounted, so you see that now with a lot of stoves and so forth, much easier to use. Electrical outlets and light switches with dimmers allow access from seated or standing positions. So a lot of these outlets here are pretty good height. So having things, even if you have to use like an extension cord or a surge protector to kind of put it, like if it's a professor, to put it somewhere where they can plug things in easily is preferred. And here we have a sign too that shows a gender neutral restroom. This is another example of inclusive design. Gender neutral restrooms for people with mobility impairments can be really helpful, because if you have somebody who has a personal care assistant or caregiver and they're opposite gender, then they can assist that person in the restroom and have it not feel awkward or whatever. It's gender neutral. So that's where you've got some allyship in that push for that between people with disabilities and transgender, because we both benefit from having that type of setup. So again, that's a good, gender neutral restrooms is a good example of inclusive design. Fixtures and furniture reach. These are a couple of diagrams from Temple University. They've got a great website we'll reference at the end that show a little bit about kind of the standards we look at for forward reach and side reach. So this could apply not only in a classroom, but like at coffee shops and restaurants. I know when I'm going to get coffee, sometimes it's like way up here and I'm like, I just want the creamer. I just want some sugar. Please, may I feel like Tiny Tim there for a second there. Please, may I have some sugar? It was unintentional. But I'll sometimes do a side approach reach if it's a little bit, if I can't get up close, because you'll notice there for the wheelchair user to get up close, they need that clearance below the surface they're at. So the clearance generally underneath, you want about 30 inches width and about 20 to 25 at least depth there. And you can see that with that work surface. To reach the back of that, you don't really want that more than about 25 inches to reach. So if you're looking at desks that have something the person would need to reach in the back, that's kind of what you're looking at. And you can see the height for reach is about 48 inches standard. So anything you're having to reach higher than that is going to be too difficult. So think of that if you guys, any of you work in a Starbucks or whatever, or a coffee shop, don't want to buy a Starbucks, but any kind of coffee shop, look at where things are and where you can maybe make that easier for your customers coming in. Look at the reach there. Information technology, what slide are we on? I got a couple more and then I'll switch over. Computer labs, again, you see a picture here of some different adjustable height tables. Do vendors provide accessibility features, caption video, compatibility with assistive technology and computers and software? So great example of that is for those of you who have Mac computers. How many Mac computer users here? Okay, quite a few. And then PC? Linux? Anybody? No, okay, I just always like to ask that. So both PCs and Macs have built-in accessibility features, as you may know. Macs have some great built-in accessibility for low vision and blindness. They have something called VoiceOver, and that applies to their iPhones and iPads too. So for any computer lab, if they have Macs, they actually have a fully functioning screen reader there for someone blind to come in, sit down at that computer, and they can totally access anything on that computer, as long as the software is accessible, designed to be accessible. But the actual interface of the Mac they can interact with. Windows has something close to that, but not quite on the same level. So usually add third-party software to it, screen readers and screen magnifiers that we'll talk about later. But for if you're setting up a computer lab, or if you're in a classroom, you can look at the computer and see there's a free program you can get called NVDA, stands for non-visual desktop access. And any of you that use PCs can download that for free and see how it is to use a screen reader to access things. So basically have everything on the screen talk to you. And then Windows does have a built-in screen enlarge capability that you can turn on and see how that works. So making sure you check to see what you have on the computers and anything you don't, even looking for some free tools that you can add to it to make your computers more accessible. And that goes for video too. Any kind of video that you're going to share with your students and show in class, you should be showing with captions. A lot of research has shown that captioned video benefits more than just deaf and hard of hearing individuals. In fact, I use captions and I'm not deaf or hard of hearing, but I find it easier to assimilate the information, especially if it's educational based. So good idea to do that. Adjustable height tables used at each type of workstation to assist students who use wheelchairs or are small or large in stature. The monitors on adjustable arms so that the screen can be brought closer, for example, for a person with low vision. And then is adequate workspace provided for both left and right-handed users. For those who have difficulty controlling a mouse, or trackballs available. And I think I've got a couple things to show that. So if you're in a classroom space, generally we try to say, like, if the class is anywhere from 1 to 25 seats, you want to have at least one area cut out for a wheelchair user, or have that things can be moved out so a person using a wheelchair can use it. If it's anything above that, you start to go like 26 to 50 seats or students, 2 spaces, and then from 50 to 100 is like 4. So it keeps going up exponentially. But it's a good idea if you can to have, whether in at least in your building, have a standing hand desk that you can use in a classroom. Move from classroom to classroom in case a student in there needs to use that. For example, a wheelchair user or a student who has unable to tolerate sitting for prolonged periods or needs to change position throughout the class. These desks work really great. One that I really like is called the Jarvis Bamboo Standing Desk. And these are, for a motorized one, about $400. Actually, it's not bad. But it adjusts from about 27 to 46 inches, has an up-down switch for motorized control, and you can add casters, again, to make it easy to move around. Very well-made desk, pretty versatile for not only classroom, but even computer labs. So good to have at least one of those. Our staff members are aware of accessibility options, enlarged text and zoom features, including in the computer operating system, as I mentioned, and assistive technology. We have a picture of a large print keyboard there. And those we actually have at the library, but it's a good idea to either have a large print keyboard, even get like the large print stickers. You can add those to existing keyboards. I think actually all keyboards should just have large print on them. I don't know what the deal is with that, but that would just make it easy for everybody. And then have procedures to put in a timely request or a timely response to requests for assistive technology. That's just thinking about computer labs in general. These are just a few pictures of some of the typical assistive technology that is good to have in computer labs. A dual monitor setup, if you can at least have one of those, that's really helpful for individuals with low vision. If they're already using enlarged software to make everything big, then it's nice to be able to have one program on one screen and another on the other so they can multitask more easily. Or extend the display so they can have that large software spread across 2 displays. And as mentioned earlier, having things on a monitor arm makes it easier for everybody, not only from a mobility standpoint or ergonomic for adjusting the height of the monitor, but if you have low vision, I mean, I've had folks that they may use a little magnification, but they actually prefer just to have that screen inches from their face, and a monitor arm makes it easy to do that. Having a split keyboard or something like this Logitech Wave keyboard, which is contoured and has a slight curvature to the keys that facilitates a more natural wrist position. Those are not that expensive, but it's a good option to have in a computer lab. The lower left corner is a trackball. Have you guys used those? They're basically, it's like an upside down mouse, but usable for sometimes easier for folks with low vision as mobility. And then on the far right is a video magnifier. If you haven't seen one of those, it has a camera underneath the monitor that actually will magnify to very high levels any text or images you put below it. So this individual is reading a manual, and he has the text enlarged. Gosh, it could probably looks like about 6 or 7 times standard size. And then he's got a reverse contrast setting, which for some individuals is easier to read the text, like white on black instead of black on white. Tends to have less glare because then they don't have that white background bothering their eyes. So that's what a CCTV or video magnifier can afford. And great thing to have in the library, or just have something that keep that in mind, that if you have a lab where a student may need something like that, there are local resources where you can check out these devices to borrow to let a student use that on a short-term basis. And there are portable ones that do that. And then this last one I'm going to talk about before I turn over to Logan is a unique device. It's called the SciVoice Talking LabQuest 2. It's not old as a kid, it's old as a kid. Each package includes the SciVoice Talking LabQuest device, which you see there, a USB keyboard and 3 sensors, a stainless steel temperature, differential voltage, and light. And I'm just going to show a quick little 1-minute example of this. And so you can kind of see it in action. But it has speech output.
Today, we have in front of me a pH sensor, which I'm holding. I'm removing.
Oh, I gotta share this.
The
sorry.
buffer solution around.
Hold on. Quick change. Or not. Let's see if this works. I don't totally.
The electrodes of the pH sensor, and I have in front of me a common acid and a common base. And with this device I have in my right hand, it's called a Talking LabQuest. We will detect the pH of each solution to figure out if it's an acid or a base.
You'll have to listen to it. He's just showing it. It's hard to hear that, but
Gradually increasing. So we hit pH 7 at one point. We're slightly below it.
so he's putting the probe in one of the
Now we're going to
containers.
take another measurement of solution number 2.
Sounds like she has an
So
accent.
the pH is under 3, or about 3, which would put that in the acid range.
So he's just
Okay, so to summarize, beaker number 1, the pH was approximately 7, and this is a milk solution. And in beaker number 2, we had a soft drink and cola solution, and that had a pH of just under 3, so which means it's fairly acidic. So in front of me, I have the SciVoice Talking LabQuest on my left, and on my right, I have the veneer motion sensor, which
there we go. So let me go back to here. So that was just to show you that with text-to-speech on some of these devices, you can get the actual information read aloud to someone who's blind, and he's a blind chemist, chemistry professor. So for students, there are some technologies out there that can provide that information. So I'm going to turn it over to Logan.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you, John.
Yep.
Guys, John is an absolute wealth of knowledge. So a lot of these presentations is geared towards faculty and staff who may have more control over these situations, but we're really appreciative to have all these students in here because everyone an opportunity to be an ally, right? If you see anything that we're talking about that may raise a concern to you, please let the DRC know. We'd love to problem solve solutions. So we have some low-tech options for technology for STEM labs, right? A lot of our classes have labs that coincide with them. When we're looking at mobility, right, we want to look about that access and that reach, right? So maybe extended eyepieces for microscopes, a mirror above the instructor to show. So some of those angled mirrors that you may see in traffic. So they may not be able to see what's on the table, but they'll be able to see it in a different form. Support stand, beaker, and object clamps, test tube racks, right? Like John was talking about with limited mobility and the option to really grasp things, to have those tools that help you hold on to those fine motor skills. Some vision options, right? Labeled lab equipment with large print, high contrast lettering. For the most part, we do a really good job about that when we're looking at larger structures. But even in those labs, to really individualize each one of those items, those tools, it helps to have those high contrast signs. And the same thing with Braille on those signs. Braille label makers being available, puff paint. They're low-cost ways, right? So these are all low-tech ways to be able to create more accessible options. A talking tape measure, right? So it's the same thing as a standard tape measure, but after you set it to a length, it's going to voice what the actual measurement was, right?
Yeah, that was tactile ruler. I think that
tactile ruler right.
got deleted, but it's where you can feel the different levels on that. So
perfect. A liquid level indicator. It beeps when the level is finding level, right? So it's just another way to indicate that you're achieving what you're trying to. And 3D models off the shelf are 3D printed, right? So having that tactile piece in your hands. Some other interactions for mobility, right? So when talking face-to-face with an individual in a wheelchair, it's going to be most appropriate to come down and sit at eye level with them, right? Do not lean on a person's mobility device, right? Their wheelchair. This is an extension of their body. It's included in their personal space, right? It's just same things that we would have. And a lot of things are common sense when we're surrounded by whatever our typical peers. But the things to think about in a broader sense. Speak directly to a wheelchair user and never speak to their attendant if they happen to have an assistant with them.
I get a lot of sometimes when people are talking to me, it's weird. I don't know what it is, but people will stand like right here, and I will turn to the face, and then they keep moving, and I'm like, after a while I've spun around, but I'm like, just don't make me do this. Like, so it's I don't know what it is. It's like a phenomenon.
Yeah. So other ideas, right? So wheelchair user uses a wheelchair, person with a disability or a disabled person. Instead of terms like wheelchair bound or confined to a wheelchair, handicap, or special needs, right? And if you're unsure what type of, what term to use, right? Same thing with a lot of our gender pronouns and stuff like that, just ask. Do not assume what a person can or cannot do. If you're unsure, offer to provide assistance and allow that individual to respond with what type of assistance they would prefer or not prefer. So we're going to look at some more vision considerations. We're going to go through some examples, okay? So same thing. I think we take a lot of things for granted, right? When we're dealing with typical peers on a day-to-day basis, more frequently than we're dealing with individuals that may have a disability. So a lot of these things might just be common sense, but you want to start having cognizant thought about these situations, right? So when speaking to a person with low vision, use their name so they know that you're talking to them. So sometimes if I'm just orientating my body towards you, you know I'm talking to you, but somebody with low vision may not have that same opportunity. Always face the person when you're speaking with them, right? So again, our voice is our connection to that person. If I'm trying to talk to you and I'm projecting my voice this way, it's going to get lost and you're not going to understand if that's really directed towards them or not. You consider this person's need to know where they are, where you are, and who else is present, right? So always encourage other individuals to introduce themselves rather than introducing your friends to them. This gives them an opportunity to match their voice with the name. When you offer a hand to shake hands, so I screw up handshakes all the time with people who have great vision, right? So just you want to be aware of where their hand is and make sure that you're going in for an appropriate handshake. Okay? If you need to leave the person, again, you want to inform them that you're doing so. And if the person's not sitting, it may be helpful to just let them know where some things are in the room before you leave, so they have some type of physical reference to let them know that they're more comfortable. So also saying if you're leaving, let them know that you're leaving. If you return, let them know that you're returning, right? So a lot of these things are just common sense or things that we take for granted that we don't really have to do that often. But in these situations, they're really helpful. Other vision considerations, right? You don't need to feel guilty or feel bad for using terms like see or look, but you do want to avoid generalized terms like this, that, or over there that has no context if you can't see what they're talking about. If you are providing written materials, try to arrange ahead of time to find out what alternative format is preferred for this person. If somebody has low vision or are blind, most likely they will be registered with the DRC, and they would be encouraged to initiate these conversations with faculty and staff as early as possible. That way, going into the quarter, faculty knows how to address these situations. If that doesn't happen, though, you want to make an effort to better understand their preferences. If written material cannot immediately be converted, read the salient points aloud to the group. When opportunity allows, quietly offer to go over the material in more detail with this person if they feel the need to, right? So you want to make sure you're offering that opportunity. But again, if they have a format that is acceptable to them, it may not be necessary. If you are uncertain on how to include people in an activity, talk to them beforehand. Describe the activity, what the goal is, and ask how they can best participate, right? They're going to have the best understanding of how they can be involved. So these are some other types of accommodations and opportunities for individuals with low vision, right? So we use Zoom. We're using Zoom right now to broadcast this, whatever this is, presentation. So students with low vision can simultaneously view your PowerPoint or other material on their own mobile device, right? So they may have these opportunities on their own personal devices that are going to allow them to access material better than accessing it in person. So allow an alternative means of engagement. Students with low vision can use assistive technology, the personal device to enlarge what they're displaying on the big screen. So again, they just have preferences that may be already programmed onto their devices, which would be helpful.
So yeah, so like if with this presentation, since we're broadcasting it via Zoom, as a professor, I could put the code, the number, the 9-digit number for this, so that you on your mobile device or your laptop could put that in Zoom, and you would see this presentation, but just on your the screen share on your screen. And if you were using screen magnification, like Logan just said, you could really zoom in on it there and not have to rely on seeing the screen.
So this is another app right here. It's called Office Lens, and I would recommend everybody in this room downloads Office Lens. It's a great tool for just sitting off at an angle to any presentation or any whiteboard or chalkboard. It has two modes, whiteboard and document, but it auto crops the photo. So you can take the photo from any angle, and it's going to auto crop as if it was taken from front on. So you don't ever have to be moving your desk and get in front of the classroom to the center. This app will take care of that for you. Whiteboard photos can be reviewed after class and enlarged on personal devices. And handout scans can be enlarged live or later, and printed text can be read aloud on the spot. So not only does it take the picture, auto crop the picture, but it can also give you audible feedback as well.
I wish you could read the handwriting on the board. That would be great, but it will do printed text pretty well.
All right, some other interactions for vision considerations, right? So these would be situations that we're in labs, or we may having some type of physical component to a presentation, right? So if you have objects to show, it's best to make an opportunity ahead of time to get this person handle the objects. If you have more than one object, you want to name each object as it's handled, and specifically to describe each item and what you want them to be focusing on, what you want them to be noticing about each item, right? If you're demonstrating a multi-step activity, again in a lab, this would be an example of a way to positively include an individual with low vision, right? So we're really looking for a specific term. And these are things that would be taken for granted often. But for an example, we'd say something like, to demonstrate what an interaction between a base element and an acid element does and looks like, I'm going to pour 1 cup of white vinegar into a glass bowl. Now I'll add 1 cup of baking soda into this vinegar. As soon as the soda hits the vinegar, the reaction starts. You can hear it hiss. There's a light gray colored cloud forming and rising above the bowl, and the fluid is bubbling vigorously. As the reaction is ending, the bubbling and hissing slow down and then stop. And then the cloud spreads out and dissipates throughout the room. Can anyone smell the vapor? So again, we really want to just give some detailed, specific descriptions to the items that they're holding, right? To just support their engagement. So another example, this picture illustrates something like in the community, but these are things that you could be doing as well on campus, right? And these are your opportunities to be an ally for individuals. So, for example, if someone was in cafeteria or they're in the avenue or something like that, Joe, this is the lunchroom. We entered on the side facing the UU. On our right is a table stacked with cafeteria trays. On our left are the trash cans lined up to the left of the door we just entered. In front of us, about 10 feet or 4 paces, is where we line up to order our food. Would you like me to read the menu to you, or do you already know what you want to read, right? Or maybe you can speak with staff. Maybe they have a Braille menu or menu printed in Braille, or other options, or a large text as well.
And that's what we call generally being a sighted guide, using those principles as a sighted guide to orient people verbally and sometimes through touch. Like you can help guide their hand to someplace where you want them to know where something is too. So work with them on that.
So other vision considerations, right? If you were this is more for a group dynamic, right? If you guys are going out doing walking tours, like some of the beach trips that are happening, or any other type of field trip around the community, or even on campus, right? So we're going to be walking up this ramp to the front entrance of the admin building. Once we pass through the automatic doors, we'll travel in small groups to the 3rd floor in an elevator to meet with the financial aid representative, right? So you're just going through and making sure you're really diligent about describing what's going to happen before it happens, right? A lot of us have the ability to foresee what we're going to get ourselves into, but that's not the case for someone with low vision or blind. Try to arrange for this person to be near you when you are giving verbal information. So a lot of things are picked up off of our body language, and even just seeing my mouth move, they don't have that luxury again. So make sure that they are close to you. That'll help alleviate any background noise that may be distracting. Additionally, if you're in a situation presented by other people, try to be that ally and forewarn a presenter or some type of guest that you have individuals with low vision or blindness in the room, and encourage them to use more descriptive language when they are presenting. So at the DRC, we offer a lot of accommodations. Professors can provide these accommodations without our support as well, and these are things that everybody can do to be supportive, right? So some accommodations to consider for mobility. Oftentimes we look at priority registration, right? It's a big campus and classes can get stacked on top of each other. We want to allow that we have ample time to get to and from where we need to be. Relocating classes for accessibility. We want to look at the numbers of the classroom, how the desks are orientated, opportunities for types of desks in that space. Any other reasons for relocating classes?
Elevators, if there's like elevators not working in a building or there's no elevator in a certain space.
Yeah. So some of those complications, we can have the opportunity to rearrange where a classroom would be located. Tram services on campus. You may have seen our tram service driving around. We have little tram placards around campus, but that could be helpful as well. We have the opportunity to provide specific furniture for individuals with mobility issues. Provide exams in Word format, right? So a lot of times for professors, when you provide an exam to us, Word format allows us to manipulate it more easily. If it's sent to us in a PDF, that makes it more difficult. Textbook conversion as well. We have a service where individuals can drop off their textbooks for us. We can convert them to audible PDFs.
And that can be helpful too with somebody with mobility. If handling a regular full-size book is difficult, might be easier to control it with a computer, and it's less that they have to carry around too. So.
Speech recognition software, we use Dragon, natural speaking, and the Mac dictation. So again, John was talking about Mac has a lot of built-in services already, TC as well. Use of a portable whiteboard for exams or extended time on exams to allow for correct expression. So some other considerations that are more specific to vision, right? We offer enlarged text. So again, if you were a professor, if you're working with a professor, you can let them know what your preference would be. If a professor has difficulty doing that, again, you can encourage them to provide it to us in a PDF or in a Word document. That way we can convert it on site. Preferred fonts also, sans serif is most preferred, and there's an example of serif fonts versus sans serif fonts. It creates a higher percentage of readability, right? And so it improves reading rates, and it looks clean right there. We also use screen magnifying and reading software like JAWS and Zoom Text. What's cool about JAWS is a lot of people have seen maybe PDF readers that can read text on computers. JAWS is a whole screen reader, so it'll read every tab, and it allows for full control of the computer without using a mouse. So a pointer on a mouse is relatively useless for somebody who can't see it. So this allows you to control the whole computer through your keyboard. We also have video magnifiers for physical exams. We have tram services on campus as well. High contrast slides in print is something to remember. You know, when you're using monochromatic colors, if you're using light blue on a dark blue slide, it can be a lot harder to see than black and white or white on black. again, providing exams in Word format, might look at priority registration, preferred seating to make sure that they can see where they're choosing. Again, textbook conversion and extended time on tests. Cool, so there's some of the information that we were referencing. Washington Do It's incredible. Temple University has some good information as well. And then there's basic standards from the ADA.
That last one's a real joyful read right there. That's some...
Cool, thank you guys for coming. Does anyone have any questions or comments about what you may have heard?
If you put your email and your name down, we'll send you a copy of the presentation if you're interested. And as Logan mentioned earlier, we're available as resources if you have questions. Just keep in mind, a lot of what we showed you, though, when you put those in place, everybody benefits. So it's good to start thinking that way inclusively, and you'll start to see a lot more people can benefit from what you're doing. So thanks for coming.
Thank you, guys.
All right.